They have to make going live, which used to be so easy, so complicated. I don't know until the video is finished whether you can see me or you're seeing the other side of the phone, or if I'm horizontal or vertical. You know, one of the, it's, by the way, hello and welcome on this beautiful early spring morning in the northwest of Ireland. I hope you're all keeping well. One of the issues, the problems with the Abrahamic mind virus, and when I say Abrahamic mind virus, I mean, if you're a European and you're, of an Abrahamic religion, you carry within you certain frames of reference regarding things that are purely arbitrary based on Jewish, particularly law, rabbinical law. And so you may think you see this all the time with things with people who think they're like Nordic pagans, especially, and they have extremely Abrahamic minds, because a lot of the Nordic pagan types come from sort of like Presbyterian backgrounds, things like Lutheranism and stuff like that, and they think that they still carry that software inside them, that they have this kind of moral absolutism that's it's the cancer of the West in many ways, this moral absolutism. And I'll tell you why. Morality and human decency are two very different things. Human decency is just is what it says on the tin. Morality is behaving according to an arbitrary set of rules decreed usually by religion. In the case of the Abrahamics, it's the Ten Commandments. Now, again, if you're a Christian, a Muslim, or a Jew, that's none of my business. I don't care what you do. I'm just talking about in terms of the dynamics that has affected the Western mind. Now, this comes from the point of view of monotheism. One God, one law, one rule, one king, one emperor, one world order, one world government. And that's the whole idea of a one world government is extremely Abrahamic. And those people, and just like communism and Marxism is extremely Abrahamic, centralized control, one law, one rule, one government, one bureaucrats, one politburo, one church, one true religion. This all comes from the Abrahamic mindset. Now, that, along with that, as I said, comes the moral absolutism. Moral absolutism is purely made up rules. It's not really based on anything that is in terms of natural law. Now, in a polytheistic or pagan society, you have moral relativity, and moral relativity has a completely different aspect. I'll give you an example of moral absolutism compared to moral relativity in an Abrahamic religion and in paganism. In moral absolutism, say in Islam, you see them saying, in Islam, all men equal, black, white, yellow, all same. In Islam, but they don't tell you it's in Islam that they're all black, white, or all the same. Outside of Islam, they're infidels to be beheaded or converted, regardless of what, color of skin they are. They're only equal within Islam. And that's the moral absolutism of the Abrahamic mind. Likewise, you have this whole thing in, the Ten Commandments, where murder is considered less rotten than killing your parents, And if you look at the rules within the Old Testament, they're just as crazy as the ones in Islam, and so just as sectarian. And this mind infects people who think they're pagans as well. So they literally apply their Abrahamic mind virus programming to their paganism. You see it a lot in that, like, Nordic paganism, an awful lot. That's why it's so churchy. What it's like, it's parade, it's church festivals, and it's little church house, and their little minister who dresses like an Anglican minister. That's what they are. Then they have the same. They have their blots and everything have the same, this sort of like same rules. There are no rules per se within, say, moral relativity, because relativism, because if you see something that's an injustice, it's naturally self-evident through natural law. That's exactly what it's there. It's wrong. You don't. So these Christians, particularly in America, say things like, "If it wasn't for the Bible, we wouldn't know right from wrong." No, humans have always known right from wrong. They have found graves from thousands of years ago of disabled people who lived to be old, lovingly buried with all little trinkets and everything around them. What does that tell you? Someone took care of this disabled person all their life. They didn't need the Ten Commandments of the Bible to do it for them. And so you have this moral. So, this is one of the reasons I can't stand the truth. They're saying it's full of fucking these, like, frustrated Presbyterians and free Presbyterians and Lutherans who, we're going to fight the one world order with the one world religion. What? Huh? They don't. Well, they don't think about nothing. And so, on the greater scheme of things, where the problem lies in the world is everything that we say in the alternative scene and alternative thinkers, tribe-minded people, what we're against is really the Abrahamic mindset, and a lot of them don't seem to realize that. The whole thing of, like, globalization is Abrahamic in nature. We that we're all, when they say multiculturalism, they say the same thing as the, all same in Islam, all black, all white, all same. It's the same thing. Globalism. If you're on the outside of globalism and you disagree, you're a heretic. You're to be cast to the wind. You are an apostate. You are an infidel. You are far right. And this is why, to pathological individuals, the Abrahamic mindset of I'm right and you're wrong appeals very strongly to them. It doesn't even matter, especially, there's a whole thing of the moral totalitarianism is, well, it could be a stupid peasant who is barely educated. It's someone who who watches truther videos all day, but he knows more than scientists. Why? Because, well, he has this kind of pseudo-Abrahamic mindset that he's fighting the New World Order when he's part of the New World Order. Now, the people will say to me, like, you hate, you're generally an anarchist or maybe sort of like a far libertarian person. Why do you like Trump? Because he's a disruptor. He's a disruptor. And when people say he's just one of them, I've seen no proof of that. He's not one of them. This is why they're trying to kill him and destroy him. And that's why they hate anyone who has anything nice to say about him. He's a disruptor. So, and when people say, oh, he's all about the money, so what? What's wrong with that? What the hell is wrong with that? What's wrong? That's just how the world is. And he's a disruptor, and he terrorizes and torments the people we don't like, who are the globalists and the WEF and the EU and all the others. Now, these people are the epitome of Abrahamic thought process. But if you really want to see where Abrahamic thought process really exists, go to academia. Academia, you see, in the old days, academics were like, they'd sit around and they would discuss things, ideas, philosophies, and they would come up with different ideas and concepts and spin about hypotheses and all this kind of thing and mull over things. Nowadays, an academic, it purely exists to enforce orthodoxy. It doesn't matter what the orthodoxy says or not, they just are there to enforce it. I'll give you an example. All the academics who are in the West, and if you ask them about Trump, they go Orange man bad. And they ask them about Putin, they go Russian man bad. And you cannot explain to them about the encroachment upon Russian territory by NATO, and especially by the Obama-Clinton years, and surrounding Russia with NATO, and documents out there by globalists saying we have to destroy Russia to get the New World Order to happen, and all this. You can't tell them this. No, Russia, man, bad. Russia is a dictatorship. You can't. There's no nuanced thinking. Same thing with Trump. You can't tell he's a dictator, but you got the majority of the popular vote. He's still a dictator. That's he's a sinner. He's an evil man. He's not subscribing to this moral totalitarianism that the Abrahamic mind contains. It has nothing. Now, I'm not saying that all Christians are like this. Of course they're not. Or Abrahamic people are like this. But this virus is in there to make you believe that your way is the only way. And it causes enormous emotional suffering within Western man as well, because it's not typical of us. If you look at Europe before Christianity, it wasn't a peaceful place. Of course, there was wars, but there was no wars over sectarianism. There was no wars over religion. The wars were exclusively over land and livestock and kingdoms and rights of ascendancy and bloodlines. They were not over. They were never over religion. Pagans didn't give a shit what other people worshipped. It was none of their business. They didn't care. It was irrelevant. It's just, we have our beliefs, you have yours, and we're probably kind of more similar than we are different, but it doesn't really matter. And the history of paganism is the incorporation of, aspects of other paganism into other pagan traditions. So as like you have Baal, the tradition that made its way into Latin paganism and became very popular in the Roman Empire towards the end of the empire, right before Christianity came along. You had the most famous one is Mithraism, which was pagan monotheism, but it was still a pagan god. You can have pagan monotheism as well. And he became the primary god of the Roman military, and eventually through Constantine and later on in the Roman Empire, he became transformed into Jesus Christ, because they're basically the same archetype. And there's also other aspects of Jesus in paganism. There's paganism and Jesus. There's Apollo, of course. Like Apollo was a much loved god. The attitude towards Apollo in the ancient classical world was exactly identical to that how we see Jesus Christ, peaceful, loving man who's that kind of thing. Ironically, he's also associated with Lucifer. And Lucifer and they both have the same mother, Aurora, and they both have the same sister, Diana, Artemis. This is probably why they have that concept in the Bible of Jesus being the sun and the morning star. It's probably Apollo they're talking about. There's a whole other subject I'm talking about, because theology is fascinating by itself. That's a video for another day. But so that's why I don't. The reason why I'm glad Trump is out there torturing, even though I don't care about the Republican Party or I don't even care about democracy. He's my moral relativism, my political relativism, my overall nuanced sense of reality is we need this guy because he's helping. That's how I've always been about these things. I don't see things in absolutism. When people say to me, this person is evil or that person is evil, I say, well, why? Because I don't like him. This kind of. And you end up being a muttering simpleton, going satanic, at everything, and that's all the Abrahamic mind again. That's the Abrahamic mind again. All Satanism means is like against the orthodoxy. That's all that means. The opposer. It has nothing to do with a demon or a devil or anything like that. So you see that in academia. The academics of today, they only have one function, and that is to be orthodoxy enforcers. And they don't care if the orthodoxy is right or wrong. They're much closer to mullahs or to the Inquisition than they are to true academics. This is why they're all banging the war drums, and this is why they get everything wrong all the time. In years to come, we will talk about the academics of today. Probably the last, 50 years, we will talk about but especially like say from the late 1980s on, we will talk about these academics the way we talk about mullahs, and these the Spanish Inquisition, and the Puritans the way we do today. The Puritans were the ultimate expression of that Abrahamic mindset. They were the ultimate expression of that. Now, where did the Puritans go to? They went to New England. Where's Harvard and Yale? Where's Cornell? Not too far away. It's not New England, but it's not near enough. you know, New England, New England. And so that Abrahamic mentality is infused, even though they may become secular, may call themselves atheists, they still have the, you're either on God's side or you're the enemy kind of thing. Now, I will, see, the thing is, like, when I'm against something like the World Economic Forum, I just see a bunch of idiots who are extremely foolish, short-sighted, and have this utopian. Yeah, there's psychopaths and there's fanatics in amongst them, but most of them are clueless idiots who don't really have a full understanding of life. The way they think that human beings can be suddenly changed into something else shows how sheltered their own lives have been, and a lot of this has to do with academia. One of the things about the NPC, I remember years ago, not years ago, about 5 years ago, I was reading on Reddit about NPCs, and a few people mentioned on that group, it was about that they used to have an internal dialogue before they went to university. Isn't that interesting? So they could distinctly remember having an internal dialogue before they went to university. And then they encountered the academic mullahs and high priests who removed their ability to nuance thinking and rewarded them exclusively upon moral absolutism, academic absolutism. And this is the root of the problem of the suffering in the West. And this is why the West is in a state of entropy. It's in a state of entropy because we're not having new discussions, new ideas coming into the fold. What we're having is entrenchment of orthodoxy. That's what the academics are doing. They're completely lockstep with government policy, with corporate policy, and with the media. And they have raised a whole generation of student activists who think they're part of the resistance, and all they do is echo. They would be like, do you remember the High Sparrow in Game of Thrones? Remember those, like, there's little minions around him? That's what the students are, the activists. They think they're activists against the orthodoxy, but they're actually fighting for the orthodoxy. And you see that clearly, right? That's apparent with Trump derangement syndrome. Now, this thing of entropy, funny enough, and synchronistically, this week the New Scientist had a fascinating article about they might they may have, well, I'm not saying they may have, but they've thrown in a theory to explain gravity. Now, gravity is a very mysterious thing. Nobody knows what gravity is really. They can measure it. You can feel the effects of it. They know basically how it functions, but they don't know what generates gravity. Gravity as a force is a total mystery. It's even if you calculate it into things like Newtonian physics, it's really a force enacting upon other forces, rather than something that's standalone, explained by itself. Now, this new line of research, what I find fascinating, and I'll say definitely noteworthy. I won't go as far as plausible. Well, plausible, but like not saying is it. Again, nuanced thinking. You see, the scientific process came directly out of the pagan mindset, which previously came from natural philosophy. Which previously came from the Greek symposiums and so on, where things were discussed out and ideas and spun out in the forums and discourse and stuff like that. So, like, you didn't have someone inside the forum or inside the symposium in the classical world going, this is the absolute law and that's the end of it. That was Abrahamic religion, but you now see that's encroached into the scientific thing. Like, they can't have a discussion about climate change or anything, or everything, just about everything. It's like, the Science Delusion, that book by Richard Sheldrake. That's it. It's a religion for so many of them. But anyway, back to gravity. Now, the flat earthers say that gravity doesn't exist. Of course, they say it's that we're held onto the earth by velocity of the flat earth moving upwards, but that would still imply gravity exists below the earth. So stupid. But below the flat earth. But gravity is a mysterious force. Now, I've often thought about it in relation to things like dinosaurs. Like dinosaurs, if dinosaurs were alive today, they would instantly die because their internal organs would be crushed by the weight of their bodies in this gravity that we have at the moment. Now, so that's why the largest animals on Earth, like the blue whale, they're in the sea, because the buoyancy stops their internal organs from being crushed. Now so therefore, the dinosaurs. There's two things that conclusions you come to. Dinosaurs are a lot of bollocks and they never existed, and they're just bones that were thrown together. It's not true. It's not. When you start really looking into paleontology, no, it's they did exist, and there's a lot of evidence now that they were probably even bigger than we thought. So that changes us to something else. Gravity was less. Now that is very interesting. So we had less gravity on the Earth, and were able to support the giant lizards, the dinosaurs, and much larger trees and much larger everything. And there's probably even at the time of Gigantopithecus, the whatever he was called, the giant human. Maybe that was even the same for him. We don't know. And also the giants of Malta, and that idea of the aquatic ape, so is very interesting too. So yeah, you absolutely there were giant humans in the past, and the sleeping lady of Hal Safanini in Malta, that little statue, it shows a woman who can't stand anymore. She's like as if gravity is taking her down. But it's a very loving statue. Again, these people had decency back then. They wrote their Bible without the Bible 5,000 years ago. Now, the New Scientist article proposed that gravity may be a form of entropy. Oh, that's very interesting. And as energy begins to die, the force of gravity is created by the entropic state. Now, as soon as I read that, I was like, that really does make a lot of sense. What happens to a leaf when it dies on a tree? It falls to the ground. What happens to humans as they age? Once you pass middle age, say 50, early 50s, you're going downhill, literally, and your body starts sagging. You become quite wary of heights and dangers of falling. I mean, I used to run up 30, 40 ladders years ago like it was nothing. Oh, right to my 40s. Now I'm afraid to get on a 6-foot step ladder. Because after 50, if you have a bad fall, you might never get better. And luckily, I still have really strong bones and stuff like that. But it's still, my knees sometimes, if I find myself falling or on the ground, my knees hurt a lot when I'm trying to get up. And it's like, women, they're going about, I had a great rack when I was younger, and now it's not there anymore thanks to gravity. So even on a kind of a allegorical, metaphorical, human level, there is an association between entropy, aging, and gravity. And that to me, and then I was thinking about it further. You think about like when say a space station is in orbit, okay, and you see the astronauts and they're that weightlessness they experience, and watching a crow collecting bits for their nest, and it's just the sweetest, cutest thing. Hello, he just flew by then, and it's just the sweetest, cutest thing watching him gathering up his little twigs and sticks to build his nest. Yeah, to get himself a woman. But see, that's like the entropy, the recycling, that's like the twigs that came down in the storm. That entropy is now being converted into new life in the form of baby crows being born. See, paganism is, it's like the joke is like the Christians arriving to the indigenous people and saying, "We've come here to stop you worshipping the sun." And they go, "Oh, dude, the sun is real, we can see it and point to it." There you go, an example of that. So this is why the entropy and gravity thing appealed to me. When say like in a space station like the ISS, that every single spaceship in orbit, satellite, whatever, is actually crashing towards the Earth. It's just doing it in a very tight spiral, coming closer and closer to crashing into the atmosphere, burning up in the atmosphere. So when you see like the ISS, Skylab, Soyuz, and all these other spaceships in orbit, they're floating not because of weightlessness of space, but because they're falling towards Earth, and that's actually That's actually like a gravity thing, throwing them up. It's like when you throw someone up on a blanket, and they go up in the air. Same kind of thing. So they're falling. They're not actually floating in space. They're falling towards Earth. Same thing. That's why they train them in aircrafts that go up and suddenly make a dive and they lift up inside. That's how they train the astronauts to get used to weightlessness. Now, within, say, interstellar space, you still are weightless, but it's a different kind of weightless. There's less force involved in it. That was observed by the Apollo astronauts when they became closer to the moon. Now, it still doesn't explain what the gravitational force is, but entropy would explain it, I think, and the more I think about it, that as energy or matter is deteriorating, there's always a downward trajectory. There's always a downward trajectory. And what does that tell us then? That there's an element of consciousness related to gravity. And maybe this is how, there's lots of reports of levitation all through history. That some of them was remarkably well documented. Is by overcoming this entropic trajectory is what allows these people to levitate. I find that just fascinating. I just find that absolutely fascinating. So that's that. Energy always dissipates. Newtonian physics proves that. You burn a bottle of gas, that proves that. And unless it's continually replenished. So gravity is a byproduct of this entropic state. Yeah, I like that a lot. Now, what does that have to do with this moral and objective relativity and absolutism? This is why the West is dying. The West is dying because we have been in a state of cultural, political, social entropy since the collapse of the Roman Empire. Because what was brought in... Now, I know there was all problems with the collapse of the Roman Empire. There was like the actual families that took over, the Flavians. A lot of them were nutcases and stuff like that. Sure, I know all that. But there's been a ongoing desire to resurrect the classical world within the classical pagan world, within the Western establishment. Even Julian the Apostate, even the Byzantine Empire, before it was destroyed by the Ottomans. It was an attempt to keep that world going within, following the Great Schism in the Christian Church between Catholicism and Orthodoxy. Catholicism, the only reason Catholicism survived in the West is because it incorporated paganism. The only reason that Orthodoxy survived in the East is because it continued within the Byzantine Imperial Roman structure that it came from ultimately. And the Renaissance was a desire to create a revival of the old pagan or classical world. Well, it was, because they started finding when they were remodeling cities like Rome and Milan and Florence, they were finding all the statues that they had buried quickly, so the apostates could smash them up with hammers, and not the apostates, the iconoclasts could smash them with hammers and stuff like that to protect them. And that was almost like a psychic trigger that gave birth to people like, Raphael and Bussolini and Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci. It became like it triggered a sort of like a subconscious memory within their minds and brought back the old classical world, the techniques and skills and engineering. Same thing happened during the Enlightenment, where all these neoclassical buildings sprung up. This is one of the reasons I like Trump. He wants new American buildings to be federal buildings to be built in the neoclassical style that the founding fathers of the U.S. I mean, you look at the American Capitol building. It's a basilica. What's a basilica based on? The Roman forums, the Roman, you know, everything. You know, you look at the way American stadiums were built to look like Roman, um, Roman, you know, Colosseums and so on. And so that was a that was another renaissance that happened of sorts. And this is why the West is in a free fall, like a satellite going around the Earth, and it's holding in the orbital pattern where it's in this decreasing spiral. And the reason why academia has given up on the, you know, I have friends who are Christians, but we both, you know, might have different views on this, but we both have the belief that Western civilization must be saved at all costs, as it had been created in Greece and Rome, and moved through the Christian world to the present. That we're civilizationists. We do believe strongly in it. We may be coming at it from different angles, but you know, they may see that the collapse of the West is due to moral degeneracy. I disagree with that to a point. To a point, I disagree with it, but I think it's moral absolutism. Because even if you look at things like liberalism that took over previous conservative things, such as the sexual revolution, they immediately start writing books about it, the joy of sex, you know, this kind of thing. They didn't have a spiritual dimension like the Kama Sutra. They were just basically Bibles, you know, Bibles of behavior. And I was watching Trump's speech, the address, you know, the address to the nation, whatever it's called, the other night, the ones where the Democrats showed themselves as a defeated, borderline cult, wouldn't even cheer for a kid who has had a brain tumor. That's the entropy. And you look at them; they all look old and miserable. You look at the Republicans, the following, the Trumpites, the MAGA crowd. They're all young and attractive, and full of energy, and full of ideas. And to me, Trump represents the civilizationist. He represents that fly in the ointment, that spanner in the works of globalism, which is bringing us towards a kind of a techno-Abrahamic mindset. And so you always have to watch the Abrahamic mentality within you. It's very difficult to break that, but sometimes it shows up. Now, so like one person's idea of morality is different than another person's, because morality is totally arbitrary based on theological concepts. But we generally agree on human decency. We generally agree on that. So, like, that's the way out of this. Human decency is the outward expression of natural law. That it's not done because it's the moral or the sainted thing to do. It's done because it makes sense. If you see someone who doesn't deserve to be hurt, stop it. Why? Not because some God told you, but because that person being hurt for no reason didn't deserve it. But if somebody attacks somebody and gets a punch back, you look back and go, well, that's natural law in action. That's natural law. And this is the problem. There's this entropic state of the West, is because, I mean, with this wave function collapse happening, and by God is it happening, one of the best things that's come out of it is the return of the Latin Mass in Catholicism. Because basically both the Protestant Reformation and Vatican II were designed to entrench to entrench sort of Second Temple rabbinical Judaism within these both the Christian traditions, when in reality they didn't come from that. They didn't come from that that rabbinical tradition. They came from something very different. They came from an infusion of paganism. You know the way like hippies and New Agers say things like, "Oh, the Celtic Church was a mixture of paganism and Christianity. That's for me." No, Catholicism is a mixture of Christianity and paganism. And it has been corrupted from Vatican II on. Vatican II was a horrific betrayal of rank and file Catholics. And so when I see things like the growth of the Tridentine Catholicism and the folk Catholicism, people becoming quite Catholic without actually going to the church, and especially the Latin Mass, it does make my heart sing. It just goes to show you that, like the church itself, the Vatican as a machine, was very Abrahamic. One pope, one leader, one Vatican II council, one Humanus Vitae decree, one edict, one law. And Catholics said, I don't think I have to do what the Pope says, especially if all these bishops have been caught messing with kids, and then they're telling the rest of us that I can't you put a rubber Johnny on me Mickey. That's a break from moral absolutism. And it says, fucking, I'm going to use a condom. We've got 4 kids, we don't need 5. We don't need them, I don't want them. And I'm not going to be told I can't do it by a guy who's like molesting children or protecting child molesters. And you now see the Catholic Church, the Vatican, I should say, is in its decline, but Catholicism is growing as a religion. And what does that tell you? That's a wave function collapse thing too as well. The entropy has completely set in now with the Vatican. And Pope Francis, his debt is kind of, now when he dies, your leaders, this is a guy who's, he's ridiculous, this guy. There's no point in being a Catholic, with him being Pope. And he's just a globalist New World Order type. And so, and we had poor Pope Benedict, a great man who tried to warn Catholics of the world how evil the Vatican was, and even said it had been taken over by demons. And he was basically fired from the job, and they put every photograph out there they could find of him to make him look evil, when he was a man who was his face had been contorted by fighting demonic forces inside the arena. Because that's what happens to you. Your hair goes grey early. You become old before you age rapidly when you're in the arena, in the fight. I'm even seeing it now with Trump. He's starting since he's won his battle and he's in control, I've noticed a somewhat slight aging there. It's almost like he's fulfilled his mission, and now he's just basically got to underline the T's and dot the I's. That's really what he has to do. So I might make another video later, but I just want to talk about, be careful of the Abrahamic mind consuming you in every way, thought and deed, because when entropy sets in somewhere like that, and you're fixed to this moral or theological absolutism, you have nowhere to go but where? Down into hell. Gravity again and entropy. Take care, love yous all. And we'll talk again soon. I have to get on my fucking glasses to see what I'm doing. Entropy. The old eyes aren't as good as they used to be. The old eyes aren't as good as they used to be.